Hello and welcome back to LexCon Crypto. We have a wonderful show planned for you today. And of course, as always, we are focusing on crypto regulations. We like to call that the crypto regs. And we are excited to have today with us Brendan Cochrane, a lawyer out of Massachusetts who focuses on crypto compliance and has just a real handle on the space. This real emerging space, thinking about regulation, compliance, and working with companies to help them stay in line. And really, this is a difficult thing. Now, our show today will cover a variety of topics revolving and really starting at that compliance place, but also looking at the regulatory environment around crypto. So I hope that you stick around for the whole thing. We've got a lot of interesting tidbits as we work through the show. Brendan, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me, Andrew. I'm happy to be here.
Hey, so why don't we just start with perhaps you giving us just a little bit of your background and kind of how you ended up in the crypto reg space.
Sure. Well, so a bit about me. I'm, husband, dad, father, son, active in the Knights of Columbus. Big Michigan football fan. That's my alma mater, the University of Michigan. Went to Wisconsin Law School. Started off my career in South Korea. Then I got into, came back to the States and I started working at a commercial and investment bank, and I had my first exposure to anti-money laundering programs. That experience, I really enjoyed. And then, a few years later, I heard about crypto. And I thought, there's really some interesting anti-money laundering issues here. So, I took all my time to basically, research and write articles on anti-money laundering and sanctions compliance issues related to crypto. Started volunteering with the Boston Blockchain Association. Yeah. Put together some sort of events related to sanctions compliance issues of crypto. And then I, leveraged that into a position working at a fintech where I did investigations into fraudulent transactions involving Bitcoin and Ethereum, and oversaw, compliance operations for Bitcoin ATM companies.
Interesting.
Yeah. And after that, I started my own shop, CryptoCompli, where I took care of, basically all the compliance, AML compliance needs for cryptocurrency businesses. And that was great, a lot of fun. I'm still doing it. But, I've also recently joined YK Law, which allows me to, focus on blockchain and cryptocurrency issues, and also kind of pair that with my I've over 20 years of experience in East Asia at this point. So that's a firm with a strong relationship with Chinese-speaking populations throughout the world.
Sure.
So I'm a partner there and still operating CryptoCompli.
Oh, that's great. Very good. Thank you for that overview. Now, as you think about, or as you talk about compliance, that seems like a broad general term, especially when it comes to the crypto space. What are some of the areas of compliance that you're really thinking about, or that you're working in, or that you sort of see as hot button issues in today's regulatory environment?
Yeah. Well, I, the things that I'm interested in are mainly anti-money laundering compliance, sanctions compliance. Compliance can mean, many things. Lately, I've been more interested in the regulations and compliance with those regulations from the Securities and Exchange Commission. But compliance can mean many things. I think, one particular hot button issue might be sanctions compliance. We've seen a lot of activity in that area lately. Right.
Yeah. I mean, I think that, we all, I'm sure, are aware of the action taken against a company like a Tornado Cash and others. So when as you're describing this, really what you would do is you would work with Tornado Cash to make sure that they're following the sanctions that the SEC has placed upon them. Is that accurate?
Well, I mean, if basically if a wallet address is sanctioned, you can't transact with that wallet address if you're a U.S. Citizen.
Right.
So basically, it's a strict liability offense. So that means basically, if you negligently transact with a wallet address that's sanctioned, that's still an offense. If you accidentally, it's not even sort of a degree of carelessness involved. You're still technically violating the law, and that can be a problem. So basically, when it comes to sanctions compliance, you're just basically making sure that whatever client or business you're working with is not transacting with wallet addresses when it comes to crypto that have been sanctioned.
Yeah. What are the other areas? I mean, of course, and I would imagine you would agree that sanctions is only going to increase as the various regulatory bodies continue to maybe a little bit of saber rattling, maybe a little bit of trying to gain the attention. But what are some of the other areas in compliance? I mean, you mentioned anti-money laundering. How prolific is that even today, do you think, with the visibility that many are looking at that particular issue?
Sure. Yeah. Well, it's a big issue. So there's a lot of talk about regulations and the lack of regulations maybe, or people have different ideas about regulations. But one regulation that's out there is, basically one law that's out there is the Bank Secrecy Act. Mm-hmm. So if you're a financial institution engaged in transactions with cryptocurrency, there's a very good bet that you're going to be subject to the anti-money laundering rules of the Bank Secrecy Act. So banks, Bitcoin ATM companies, they all have to comply with the Bank Secrecy Act. So there's really a lot of involved in compliance with anti-money laundering rules. So it is sort of a big issue for financial institutions.
Right. No, definitely. It's interesting. When I started getting involved in Bitcoin in the crypto space, 2010 some time period, a lot of this was developers, coders, anarcho-capitalists, sort of banding together and like experimenting and kind of, just building cool things, just like they did in Web 2. They were just building sites or building cool apps, and, they never really had to worry about the compliance thing. And it seemed like that was allowed to go on for some period of time until all of a sudden the SEC decided that this was actually a real thing that needed to be regulated. And when they came in as if, at least from my opinion, they came in very strictly, acting as if these, players had already known what they were doing and were willfully, going against it. And I'm sure maybe there were some that were like that, but have you seen from your experience and perhaps the clients and work that you're doing, have you seen some of that? And is the market maturing to a place now where there's a broader awareness around compliance? Or do you feel like we're still kind of in that place of, we're developing dApps, we're just building cool things, and we find ourselves, in trouble with the SEC? Yeah.
Well, the technology really does seem to outpace the ability of the government to produce new laws and regulations. So, I'm sure there's technological developments out there today that, are developing. Really, it hasn't really caught the government's attention yet. And, maybe like crypto was, 10 years ago or so. I think that, it came to a point basically where it became very important, and it had a sizable impact on the economy at large. Yeah. So the government took notice.
Yeah.
As far as where we're at right now, I would say there's still a long way to go. We're still very much kind of like in an infancy stage of the development. like sort of maybe the late infancy stage, but I mean, many people have heard of crypto, but
right.
It's actually kind of a cumbersome process to even set up, an account at a major exchange and send and receive crypto.
Right.
So,
right.
The technical hurdles and the regulation is not as comprehensive as it could be, so I mean, there's a lot to figure out still. So it's kind of early on.
Yeah. I sort of have that same sense that the user experience is still very cumbersome, and it still seems to me like one of the big things that I keep hearing from stakeholders in the crypto space, whether it's CEOs or investors, is the lack of regulation, the uncertainty. So when you're thinking about compliance, how are you thinking about sort of the lack of regulatory insight and guidelines when you're advising clients and when you're kind of thinking about this crypto space today?
Yeah, I mean, that's something that clients often have a concern about, like maybe there's some kind of new technology, a new coin or something they're working with that, there isn't some guidance that's exactly on point. So, one of the things that we're trained to do in law school is to kind of, look at precedents and sort of synthesize rules for novel cases. And so I think one of the things that can be done is, you can look at sort of novel or sort of, guidance that's been put out there for other instances and kind of synthesize, a possible procedure to handle some kind of new technological development. Another thing that, companies can do that that would help with this sort of lack of regulation is something called a culture of compliance. So, if you start out with this mindset, senior leadership takes ethics, compliance very seriously. It can trickle down through the entire organization. And, that can help to overcome, hurdles where, maybe there's not so much clarity there, but you have the will to kind of figure out a way.
Yeah. Yep. No, I think that makes a lot of sense. And I do think that we are seeing a culture of compliance evolving. Obviously in every emerging market, there's a place for, early adopters, and they're always going to be innovative, on the edge, that personality type. They're going to be spending $60 million on ape NFTs and other things, but I think that also, behind that, as the market matures, you start to see certainly this idea of compliance, and that seems to be happening, kind of before our eyes, even as regulations start to come into shape. Who today do you sort of are you looking at? Like who are the ones that are, who's making the laws? I guess is what I'm going to get at. Is it the SEC? Is it the CFTC? Are we looking at all globally for guidance on these things? Where are you sort of seeing some leadership, and like where do you think these regulations come from?
Yeah, I mean, there's laws coming from many different places right now. We saw the Biden executive order earlier this year. Yeah. It was largely symbolic, but that's something coming from the executive branch. We have the Loomis-Gillibrand bill being put together, introduced in the legislative branch. That could kind of give, it would be a major step forward for introducing new laws. There's case law that's, starting to build a little bit. There's also laws being introduced, sort of through regulatory bodies like the SEC, the CFTC. They haven't, there's been enforcement actions, so that's, maybe not. And there's guidance that doesn't maybe have the weight of law, but it's something that is definitely worth following. And at the international level, I come from an AML, anti-money laundering background. There's international bodies advising, kind of giving guidance and ratings on anti-money laundering law in regimes within countries. there's always an effort to reach sort of international kind of coordination as far as anti-money laundering programs go. So there's conversations between governments to try and make their programs more in line, I guess.
Yeah, I think it's interesting, and perhaps there are other examples of this that I'm not aware of. But it seems to me that as crypto regulation forms, it is one of the unique things that's totally ubiquitous across the globe. Today, I mean, it seems like there is just every country is sort of thinking through and facing a lot of the same issues. It's a very unique thing that traditionally it seems like the United States will make their own monetary policy. They'll, they're doing it kind of in their own silo, if you will, independent of what other countries are doing. They're writing laws and passing bills. This though seems to be truly more of a global effort. With your background, are you seeing some of that as well? I mean, kind of seeing other countries relying on perhaps other countries, or even are there international regulatory bodies that are also trying to weigh in on these regulations?
Sure. I mean, yeah, there's international bodies kind of coming up with, suggested kind of regulations as far as anti-money laundering regulations goes. And, they're giving ratings to countries and kind of trying to compel countries to sort of adopt their suggested regulations sort of through they give them ratings and they can kind of shame them if they're not complying sort of with their regulations. So, that's, it's for people in anti-money laundering, it's definitely, worth keeping an eye on sort of the international bodies that, kind of influence legislation at a national level.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just kind of one of those interesting pieces. And what also is interesting, and maybe, you have some insight around this, is the timing. Obviously crypto isn't necessarily new, but it seems like every country has sort of decided that now is the time that these things have become so important, weighing on even the international economy that there's an urgency or a need to regulate against that. Has there been other countries working on these things sort of on the edges that we're just not aware of, or does it truly seem like it's just bubbled up on everybody's radar at kind of the same time?
I mean, I do think, I'm a U.S. lawyer, so I focus on U.S. laws. Sure. But I mean, it's, seems pretty clear to me that there has to be some level of coordination between governments across the globe. And, there has to be conversations and, maybe there's some kind of consensus building that things need to happen at this time. And, again, those, the super national organizations that kind of, set the agenda basically in a way for national governments to act as far as anti-money laundering regulations go. So,
yeah. So, Gary, or I guess I shouldn't say that, but most recently, and I think even it was yesterday, I think, Gensler's comments, he wrote a op-ed in the Wall Street Journal. And my interpretation of that op-ed was essentially the laws that we have in place are the laws that need to be obeyed until there are new laws, and at which point we will consider how to regulate those laws. And basically said you need to stop all innovation until we have a regulatory environment in which you can innovate in. It seems to be very regressive in his approach. And one of the debates that I've been seeing kind of emerging from this community is whether or not the current laws are indeed sufficient for the current crypto market, or if there does need to be major innovation on the regulatory side. I was wondering if you had some thoughts or opinions about that.
Yeah, I mean, there's different viewpoints on crypto and regulation, and how that can impact innovation, and how regulation can be developed to kind of make things more efficient, or how it might impede efficiency. Kind of. I mean, yeah, I guess I'm a little bit on the side of a too heavy-handed approach to regulation. Is a little bit it's a little bit kind of risky, because there's so much potential and innovation that can come from this industry. I often tell clients to kind of retain a lawyer, basically. If you have a question of whether your token offering, for instance, is going to amount to being a security, you want to have an analysis done. Kind of take a risk-averse approach there. But yeah, I mean, I do hope that innovation can continue. But I'm not one to kind of. I kind of would hope that the regulatory approach is a little more cautious, so that we can facilitate innovation as much as possible.
Right. It does seem like the SEC and particularly the CFTC have been the two regulatory bodies that have been the most vocal around crypto. I know that there has been some banking specific pieces, but like even the Fed released a letter last week kind of giving guidance to banks. But most of that seems to be really just sort of loose, I would say. The CFTC released, I think it was a 300-page paper on sort of their position, and my reading of some of between the lines there is almost as if there's a distinction growing between utility tokens and currency, and it feels to me like the SEC and the CFTC are trying to carve out their specific pieces. And I'm wondering if you've seen sort of, and if this is normal, that you have two regulatory bodies kind of trying to articulate out ahead of that legislation what are the pieces that they think that they have claims to, and in your opinion, do you think that the SEC ends up taking a majority control over crypto? Does the CFTC, or do you sort of see it? Perhaps there are distinctions within crypto that sort of start to get broken out and defined.
Yeah, I'm not sure. That's a great question. I don't know if this is normal, but I do. It may be that they are trying to sort of preemptively carve out their niches within the space.
Yeah.
I think that it's I think the Loomis-Gillibrand bill is a very promising bill, because one of the things it does is sort of begin to answer the question of who regulates crypto.
Yeah.
And if I recall correctly, one of the things that they address is the legal status of crypto, and I think that they would say that crypto would be a commodity, and there's some discussion about expanding the role of the CFTC in overseeing crypto.
Yes. Yeah. From a compliance perspective, do you feel like that's the right approach, or do you feel like the SEC should be more heavily engaged, or do you sort of see a distinction between these things?
Well, I mean, as a lawyer, basically, I'm not a legislator, so I don't create the law. I mean,
right.
Basically, we just kind of advise clients on how to stay in compliance with the law. I think that maybe the SEC might have, better kind of infrastructure to handle the big landscape that crypto is, and maybe has the experience in doing these sorts of things. But on the other hand, the CFTC could be kind of beefed up, and maybe that might be the proper regulatory body to address these sorts of concerns.
Yeah. Way off of the script here. So if we venture into far off territory, you could just say, hey, like, not totally sure, but do you think that there should be consideration for the different? So there's the Ethereum merge is coming up, and there's a lot of talk about proof of work or proof of stake. From a regulatory perspective, do you see the way that consensus is built on chain, whether it's proof of work, proof of stake, even now they have zero knowledge rollups, that there's so much technological innovation that's occurring there. Do you see the regulatory bodies being able to create a framework that can even keep up with and maintain some level of control? Or do you feel like we've sort of reached a point where the innovation is so far ahead that it's almost impossible to do something outside of like some sort of major catch up? I mean, am I way out in left field on that, or?
No. I mean, I'm going to give you a little bit of a different answer to a little bit of a different question.
Yeah.
I think, just the way our whole economy and society is structured, innovation just is rolling out so fast, maybe exponentially increasing, that, it's a question of how fast governments can move to keep up with them sometimes. And perhaps it's becoming perhaps it's a bit of an issue, like how fast governments can keep up with exponentially increasing innovation in new technologies that are out there. So I don't know. It may be. I think it remains to be seen, and maybe I'm not the person to be able to answer that question. But I think that's something I've thought about, and we'll see. There's different sorts of governments in the world, and maybe the ones that address those questions the best will come out the winners. I don't know.
Yeah. No, I think that I don't think there's any right person for that question at this point, right? I think that's to your point, kind of yet to be seen, and perhaps it is more of a global effort that things are escalating at such a rate that there needs to be a greater concern. And it will be interesting to see how countries compete. I mean, we've seen that with in crypto more than any, because of the one country imposes perhaps stringent regulatory concerns, and it is the money moves out of that country very rapidly into the next one, and you see some small countries increasing in GDP because of rapid movement. So I think it's going to be interesting to see kind of how all that plays out. But
absolutely,
Brendan, what are some? I know we talked about obviously compliance, and we talked about anti-money laundering. Are there other areas of compliance that if you were an investor, you'd be saying, I need to, before I make an investment in this company, I want to understand or know these couple of things from a compliance perspective. What are some of those things you'd be considering?
Yeah, I mean, I can, there's all sorts of compliance, right? So, depending on the company, maybe one aspect of compliance is more of an emphasis than others. I can tell you from an anti-money laundering perspective, an investor might want to know some things like, is there a written AML policy and procedure? Are the practices of the company in line with what's written? Is there a culture of compliance? Is the compliance represented on the board? Are there regular trainings? Are there records of those trainings? Is there a written procedure for sanctions compliance? And how well is that followed? If it's a business involved in cryptocurrency, are they partnered with, a reputable blockchain forensics analytics provider?
Yeah.
That can provide, tremendous insight into who you're dealing with, at least the wallet addresses, whether they're,
right.
High risk, whether they're coming from an exchange, what kind of exchange, what's the KYC, your customer, strength of that exchange.
Right.
Is it a sanctioned wallet address? So, those are the things I would look for as an investor into a business engaged in cryptocurrency transactions.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's very helpful. We're almost really at our 30-minute mark. This has been a very helpful and enlightening conversation. I really appreciate you joining us and sharing us with that. If some of our listeners wanted to get in contact with you or follow you, what are some ways that they could do that?
Sure. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. Really enjoyed this. You can find me on LinkedIn, Brendan Cochrane, JD CAMS, or you can find me at YK Law and send me an email, bcochrane@yklaw.us.
Great, great. No, we really appreciate it. And as things progress and as the landscape continues to change, I'm sure we will come back, and we'd love to have you on again at some point in the future. Really appreciate your time. Hope you enjoyed listening to Lexicon Crypto. We have just completed a wonderful show. I hope that you will take the time to listen to that. There's lots of insight, lots of, I think, tips really on even investing in crypto companies. There's insight into how regulation is made and how it is being formed. So I hope that you'll take a few minutes to listen to that. I want to thank again our guest, Brendan Cochrane, for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Lexicon Crypto.